Hello, everybody. It is, if you're watching this live, this is day 3 of Northampton Film Festival, talking to filmmakers that have been shortlisted for the 2023 festival, which, again, if you're watching live, is happening next week, so very, very soon. If you're not watching live, not a problem. Obviously, everything we talk about today, I'm sure you'll be able to catch the films and the filmmakers doing other things in other places. But I'm Becky. I'm the director of Northampton Film Festival, and I have the pleasure of watching all the entries and then helping draw up the shortlist. Unfortunately, I don't get to judge them, but we have a lovely panel that does that. So if you want to find out more about the film festival, you can do so by visiting our website, which is northamptonfilmfestival.co.uk. You can also get in touch with us at info@northamptonfilmfestival.co.uk. But yeah, if you're watching live, you can put questions in the comments wherever you're watching, and if they're vaguely relevant, I will put them to our guest, who is, we have Robert Stanley Crampton from the documentary Shove It, the Xero Slingsby story. Cool, that's a lot of words there, but I got them out, which I'm quite impressed by. on a Wednesday afternoon. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Robert. Yeah, really interesting film. I have to admit that before watching this film, I did not know anything about Xero Slingsby. So to start off, could you tell us a little bit about who he is?
Well, yeah, Xero Slingsby, real name Matthew Coe, was a maverick, a rebel, and a bit of a misfit. So very appropriate.
Yeah, perfect. Well done.
Got that in. He was a fantastic jazz musician. I'm not sure it is jazz. I mean, he could blow a saxophone like very few other people, and he was incredible. I mean, he was quite a figure, well known and very visual around Leeds in the 1980s and in the end of the 70s and early 80s, and sort of drifted from jazz band to jazz band, and was quite a well-known figure on the streets of Leeds, doing a lot of busking and so on. And sadly, he died of a brain, following a brain tumor. He was struck down by a brain tumor in 1985, and sadly died in 1988. And he was well loved. I mean, one of the amazing things I've found when I was making the film, sort of last summer and into the autumn, was the amount of love that is still out there for Matthew and the band and the music. And even, approaching nearly 35, 40 years on, it's been this kind of force that exists out there, and I think that comes through in the film hopefully very clearly. And it was certainly something I carried, because I saw the band Xero Slingsby in the works in the Adelphi pub in Leeds in I think it must have been 1986. It is a bit foggy, probably alcohol and age have got in the way of that. But it was something that I carried with me for all those years. It was always kind of like a memory of a fantastic gig and a fantastic night, because there wasn't just music; it was quite theatrical, and it was very, very elaborate, and staging of props and bells and whistles, literally, and horns and things like that. So it was all very exciting. It was quite a visceral kind of performance, very punk, very jazz, and that fusion of the two, and especially when it's fused with a good pint of beer as well, everything becomes fantastic, even more so. But it was, a long time ago, and basically how things came to a head was about, when was it? It was just sort of in September, October 21. I was having a bit of a sort out. I had a huge box of tapes, cassette tapes, and of course nothing to play those on. So I was thinking, well, is it time to get rid of them? And ironically, now I see that tapes are coming back in. But at the time I was thinking, well, they just clutter. And I was going through them going, keep, throw. And I found this one that was labeled Xero with an X. And I thought, oh God, yeah. And it was that Proustian moment of, it was like going straight back to 1985, 86 into the pub. And unfortunately, I didn't have anything to play it with. So I did the search on YouTube and fantastically found a load of films that Solomon Robson had very brilliantly and very kindly and fortuitously posted on YouTube. And that led me down the rabbit hole of trying to find out a bit more about this memory that I had of this fantastic night and the band, and found Solomon's brilliant sort of blog / novel called Now Then, which tells the story from his. He worked in, was with the band back in the day, and it tells the story of the band and Matthew from Solomon's perspective. And it made me think, well, there's obviously a lot of other stories out there about this fantastic guy. So it's probably time to tell the story. And so I sort of did that sort of thing. Oh, I'm sure it's been done. I'm sure there's a film out there of Matthew and the band. And for my great fortune, there wasn't. So I thought, well, I'm going to do it. And so I got in touch with Solomon, who's in Australia, and I was waiting for that email back that, will it come back? Will it come and, will this thing roll off and happen? And fortunately it did. And he put me in touch with Sally Coe, Matthew's widow. And again, it was that sort of waiting for this kind of like decision of, is this going to fly or not? And fortunately, she was absolutely and is absolutely behind the idea, and has been a fantastic supporter and literally producer of the film, helping things happen. So it sort of took us a long time to get off the ground, but actually not a long time at all in this scheme of filmmaking, because that was, let's say, November 2021. We did some initial interviews up in Leeds in the January of 2022, and then we were filming properly sort of May, June, July, editing in July actually for a deadline for getting into the Leeds Film Festival, International Film Festival. Was in August, wasn't it? I think so. The festival itself was in November. So the actual production was 12 months actually. So whistle stop tour, shove it.
Yeah, no, and I recently went to the Real Documentary Festival in Leicester, a new documentary festival. And there was lots of people talking about 5-year, 6-year, many more year journeys to get documentaries made. So yes, I think you probably share that nail biting bit of kind of, oh, will the people who really are pivotal to the story let me tell it moments. But and I think. As I said, I didn't know who Xero Slingsby was before I watched this film. I would say that jazz, experimental music, again, not my genre. But obviously way more to this story than that, and hence why we really enjoyed it. We put it in the film festival.
Sorry,
So, I mean, tell us a little bit more about obviously the music, as you said, and those memories from the 80s. Kind of electrifying and all sorts of, as you say, literal bells and whistles. But also, it's more than that. It seems, that you say the people on the street, chatting in the community were, big part of the story.
Thank you. I mean, I think it was a period of time, the 1980s, especially in places like Leeds, and I'm sure Northampton was very similar, which was sort of that beginning of the post-industrial sort of age of the traditional working system of factories and mills and breweries and so on was starting to sort of change, and thanks to Thatcher, and it was the recession of the early 80s, and there was a lot of hardship, and I think the springboard of sort of that post-punk era as well, from 76, 77 into the early 80s, is absolutely key to the story and the history of Matthew and the band, because it was a reaction against all that. It was a reaction against sort of the politics of the time and the social decline of the time, in terms of the cuts and the unemployment that was going on. But it was used the do-it-yourself ethos of punk very much as a springboard into sort of, well, we're going to do it. We're just going to, and this comes across quite clearly in the film, I think, is the fact that, well, I'm not just going to sit around and wait to be told what to do, or to wait for somebody to help me out. I'm just going to carry on. And there's a weird kind of dichotomy between sort of the anti-politics of the time, which was sort of like very anti-Thatcher and so on, for this this group of people. But also it is actually quite Thatcherite if you think about it. It's this idea of sort of, well, I'm not going to sit around, I'm going to get off my bike and do it. It was incredibly what Thatcher was doing. And I raised this with a couple of the interviewees while we were making the film. It's sort of like, well, it's weird how, you've got sort of the anti-Thatcherites being actually quite Thatcherite in terms of doing what they were doing in terms of making it happen for themselves. And I think the answer to that is very different needs and desires of where they were going. But it was an interesting period. And I think weirdly as well, I think it's very similar to, there's a big parallels with what's going on today, in terms of the cost of living crisis and a government that may or may not be, depending on your political opinion, doing what it's doing. So it has resonances, it has echoes, which is still very relevant to what's going on today. And I think one of the driving forces that made me want to make the film was, to help sort of inspire new people, new musicians, new artists, and filmmakers and whoever to sort of say, well, no, we can do that. We can sort of just get up and make our own art and make it work for ourselves. So.
Absolutely, that is as you said, the film very much that fits the ethos of Northampton Film Festival with our rebels, revolutionaries, and all that jazz. There you go, all that jazz. But also that in trying to inspire people, particularly Northamptonshire, which isn't necessarily known for its film, to kind of go, actually, totally take hold of it. Why not? Why not can Northamptonshire be known for film? I've lost my train of thought, but yes, absolutely. But I was going to say, so we'll talk about it. How did you get into this? How have you come about in 2023 to be sharing this documentary?
Well, I mean, my background was probably when I was at university was into theatre. I was just having a chat about this earlier on, actually, with somebody else. And I went into theatre. I was interested in writing because I didn't have, those days there weren't the avenues and the tools and the ability to go out and make films. Films was always, it was an expensive thing to do. And so I looked out in terms of the university I went to, had a theatre attached to it, and managed to sort of convince them to put my plays on there, and did some directing because that was the available playground that I had. But it was always kind of, film was always kind of like my long-term ambition in terms of, I just love the medium, and obviously brought up in the television age, it was very much about sort of the visual connection and using that as how you tell stories in chunks of imagery, was always kind of where I wanted to go. And I got some work experience at Yorkshire TV in Leeds, worked on the Hannah Hawkswell, one of the Hannah Hawkswell films, which was fantastic. It was just a really good experience. And then kind of drifted into advertising by mistake. My career had been in advertising, and I kind of justified that to myself because it was working with words and pictures still, and TV advertising was at the time very big and very glamorous, and I thought, well, that's a great way of making films, short 30-second films, fantastic. And so that was it. And then once I was in advertising, the hooks go in, and suddenly you're earning money and you can't get out. And so I stayed there for 20-something years. And then about nearly 10 years ago, I sort of jumped ship and set up the Stanley studio as my own little, I really want to make films now. And I will love doing the commercial stuff as well. But it was very clearly a decision to sort of be able to make the more artistic sort of narrative stuff that is where my sort of passion really lies, I suppose, in terms of telling stories. And I've been able to merge the two over the last sort of 10 years. But lockdown was very much that period where for a lot of people it was that sort of, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Where am I? What's happening now? And it gave you that time to sort of reconvene and regroup and recalibrate and sort of reconsider things. And it was very much a sort of, no, okay, I'm going to invest time and a chunk of my own money into sort of creating something that I can just go, well, there you go, that's it, and shove it was that project. So Yeah, so that was a very long story of how I got here, right now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my last question, even though I feel like we probably could talk a lot about the film and everything else, is so what next for you then? So yeah, it sounds like, you know, Shove It was quite a big moment for you, and now maybe you've got freedom to go and do everything that you'd like to do.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's still the commercial side of my job as well. So still doing a lot of that work, and please bring more. It'd be great. But there's a couple of sort of interesting projects that I'm working on now. I've written a couple of short film scripts, which are out there, and one of them in particular I'm very keen on, which I'm having a meeting about at the end of next week up in Newcastle. So I'm hoping that something will develop from there, and it'd be great to sort of get those into production this year. I mean, you know, I'm itching. Literally, he says itching, is it? I'm itching to get off the ground and get those sort of rolling. So that's probably next week. And of course, you know, promoting Shove It. I mean, it's still quite young in itself as a film, so I'm still very happy to be, you know, sort of waving the Matthew Coe flag around and getting you know, more people to hear his music and hear the band and fall in love with the film, with the staff again. You know, it's fantastic. So yeah,
absolutely.
We'll see how it goes.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Robert.
Yeah, I can't wait to show the film in Northampton. So it'd be great.
Yeah, exciting times. So yes, the film is showing at Northampton Film House as part of the film festival on Tuesday, 30th of May at 5:45. Actually, on that day, we have two music documentaries, as well as Shove It, the Xero Slingsby story. We're showing Energy, a documentary about Damo Suzuki. So I really hope it's going to be a really inspiring kind of evening of experimental music, finding your own creativity, and hopefully people will leave, like Robert said, totally inspired to go off and do things themselves. So if you want to look at the programme, you can do that at northamptonfilmfestival.eventive.org. And yeah, we really look forward to seeing you at the film festival.